Hey guys, Brassfax here. Most of you already know about the benefits of preparedness. You don't need another video on it. In fact, if you're anything like me, you're fighting a daily battle of trying to keep YouTube videos of burning cities with titles of "This is it" after you mistakenly morbidly clicked on one of them that one time 6 months ago. You don't need another one of those. You already know what preparedness is for. That's not really what this is about. Instead, I want to tackle one of the biggest logical or maybe psychological hurdles that many people looking into preparedness cannot overcome. Well, every prepper starts probably due to a pressing need, fear of the future, local riots, or maybe just because their family or religion demands it. Hey, I'm in Utah after all. One day, if you actually, think about this stuff, you're probably going to have a crisis of faith, so to speak. You will realize how expensive and time-consuming and all-encompassing the pursuit of genuine preparedness can be. You also will come to the grips with the fact that you will likely never shoot a shot in anger, you will never need most of your preps, and the only time that any of this is remotely going to come into handy is when you're bored as shit because your city block lost power for 3 days straight, or you intentionally subject yourself to Type 3 fun when you do a tactical camp and ruck with the boys. That double whammy, the cost, the money, the time, combined with the overwhelming likelihood that all of this is probably going to be for naught, tends to be the driving factor for preparedness burnout. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The first step down the path of being an actual, legitimately good, sustainable, prepared citizen is learning how to operate without the constant fear of something happening tomorrow or the next week, as we so often see with all of this fear porn, is a step towards maturity and sustainable preparedness, and also prevents you from showing up on Discovery Channel's Doomsday Preppers. So that's the video. Why I and you should continue or start preparing even despite the fact that there is a very high likelihood that none of this will ever be used. This video is brought to you by Venture Surplus. Did you know that Venture Surplus sells medical gear and is a authorized NAR retailer? Unlike all this gun stuff I keep talking about on here, there's actually a coin flip's chance you'll encounter a minor medical emergency in your lifetime. Do not look that stat up. So being ready isn't even prepper stuff, it's just having the right tools on hand for an eventuality. And Venture Surplus also hands you a nice fatty discount code to boot. We like to imagine everything can be solved by TQs, and while they're invaluable for gunshot wounds, for everyday heavy bleeds I've been involved in, they've been solved by gauze, pressure, and I'm feeling generous, just a ludicrous amount of medical tape. And while you're on Venture Surplus, we might as well get something to put all this medical stuff into. You can of course get the new fancy expensive med kits like this guy right here, or I don't know, this one. Or you could just buy a GP pouch like this, and because it's way cheaper, especially if you can get one of them used, it holds way more and, frankly, way more stylish. So yeah, go over to Venture Surplus, get your medical needs handled, as well as your pouch needs, and back to the video. The first tenet to understand is that most disasters and scenarios, even the fantastical ones, have a pretty simple policy prescription. It's not hard to have 1 month of water, 2 months of food, and an alternate off-grid power source, as well as other supplies to significantly up your odds, your quality of life, from the baseline of nothing should something ever happen. A lot of this other stuff, the tactical training, the different gun setups, drones, thermals, and more, all of that is just gravy on top. It's not to say that won't significantly up your odds of survival, of course it will, but there's a reason why certain things, guns, shooting, tactical gear, get way more attention than the boring stuff. Food, water, medical gear, you name it. Let me put that more simply. We do a lot of this ancillary preparedness stuff because it's also fun. And having fun is something that is incredibly important, because without it, you're going to be consumed by that disproportionate reality that I mentioned earlier on. So embrace it. Of course, a lot of this extra stuff, this training, the skill sets, the different rifles, the thermals, whatever, all of this does have utility, and there is a chance, however small, that it will or could make a difference. But you also need to be ready to admit to yourself that a lot of this extra stuff is going to atrophy or rot away in your attic when you hit 70, have grandkids, and have never used any of this for anything other than LARPing at the range. But that's okay, because if you allow it to both be practical and fun, then it wasn't useless, because I cherish the friends I made in the community. I'm glad I had something to focus on, a creative outlet, and I'm glad that I spent all this time on this stuff because it was fun, and that's a big driver of what humans do, things that are fun. Okay, maybe you're not the type to care about that, you're single-mindedly focused, you don't need fun to be a driving reason to do a lot of this stuff on top of the practical aspects. Well, perhaps something that is useful to you is the mental boon that preparedness conveys to you. I grew up as a hardcore Boy Scouts overseas where it's taken a lot more seriously compared to the Eagle Scout factory daycare center that a lot of the US scouting programs turned into in the late 2000s. I've been part of countless week-long trips, survival courses, summer camps. One thing that was kind of drilled into me from the get-go was shit was always going to go wrong, and I would always stress about the thing that was going to go wrong in the future. It was not until that I realized, hey, I can just take a lot of steps beforehand and prevent that from happening, that both the things that went wrong ended up not being as big of a deal, and, well, I didn't really stress about it anymore. And I think that applies almost identically to day-to-day life. A lot of your life is spent stressing about the potential of something going wrong. So if you tackle the potential of something going wrong, even though it's going to provide, short-term struggle, cost, whatever, in the long term, it's actually kind of nice to not always be worried about something going wrong because you've done all in your power to make sure that if it does go wrong, you'll be able to handle the situation with a little bit more preparedness. You compare this to the basic modus operandi of most people who just raw dog life and are constantly stressing about, what if I can't make this bill? What if my tire blows up on this car trip? What if I, shit my pants 7 times in a row and I only bought 6 pairs of underwear? I found that the prepper lifestyle, when not done to excess, can convey a lot of mental security in your day-to-day life because you don't need to be constantly dedicating brain power to fearing the unknown. Not necessarily because it's a get-out-of-jail-free card, but more so just because you've done all you can do, and thus, at this point, worrying becomes pointless, even before you ever put any of these into action. Next, the reason why I made this video. Even if you never ever use your preps in full regard, the mental step followed by action of saying to yourself, I will not be a victim, I will not roll over and die, and I will take responsibility for mine and my loved ones' well-being, and then beginning to prepare for the unknown instead of relying on someone else is the sign of a mature, responsible adult that understands the world doesn't revolve around himself. You can bitch, you can say it sucks, you can hope the government bails you out, or you can make memes about how you don't want to live in a world where shit is slightly harder than it is now, or you can understand that hardship is a fact of life, bad things will happen, and preparing for that is what responsible adults do. To me, that's the biggest part of taking preparedness seriously. Both the administrative preparedness, but also the physical and skill preparedness, resulting in you taking some of your future back from raw fate, is an empowering but also a responsible thing to do. And I think that in and of itself, if everything else didn't matter, is important, is enough to justify it in and of itself. That being said, I know a lot of you look at what I do as kind of LARP fantasy bullshit, and it kind of is sometimes, and most of you probably think that it is so unlikely as to be basically impossible that anything in our lifetime could occur where we would need this high-end tactical gear training and more. Sure, perhaps. But even if that doesn't cut it for you, even if nothing ever happens, consider this. It is our responsibility as the current generation of citizenry to hone and build upon the Second Amendment culture, its supporting preparedness infrastructure, the technologies, the companies, the general understood skill set, and to not let it be forgotten what the Second Amendment is actually for, which is not home defense at 7 yards, such that when the day comes where the Second Amendment will be needed, either for you, the next generation, or the generation after that, it is alive and thriving.
The most bougie camping of all time.
Doesn't feel like we're fucking camping.
With the dog!
What is that smell, Nova? Smell the food, huh?
You had wet food, don't you even?
Yeah. Spoiled ass. That's... Oof. No, you stay. No point for you to get up.